Page 102 in the Chayenu. We're doing the 10th of Shvat in Tanya, the end of chapter 22. Now, we said yesterday, how does God relate to evil? And the way we gave it in this kind of a little bit of Kabbalah jargon, that Hashem relates to the good and holy in a way of pnimius, of face-to-face, of, the face looking towards it, lovingly wanting it. And the way Hashem deals with klipa / evil, the concealment, is in a way of achirayim, in a way of turning his back to it, meaning wanting it only, begrudgingly allowing it in order that can be the contrast of good chosen despite, instead of it. So that was the example. So the term of, Hashem's relationship to holiness is panim, face to face, love, and God's relationship to klipa / concealment / evil is turning his back to it, achirayim, only allowing it as a means to an end, to choose the good. Now, the supernal will of the quality of countenance, of panim, which is that the inner aspect of God's will, his real desire, that is the source of life which animates all worlds. But since it is not bestowed on the Sitra Achra at all, and even the hinder part of the divine will is not the Acharayim, the backside of the divine will, is not clothed within it, but merely encompasses from above, meaning when you really have a passion, let's say, for example, you want the house of your dreams, you have to go build. So the way you relate to all the peripheral parts, like the steps to, break ground and all the building and all that, let's say the breaking ground or the demolition of the old house, that's only like in a kind of a very peripheral way. Like you want it, you have to allow it peripherally, because in the bird's eye view, it gets you to the dream house. That's what we call makif. Like, I think it's like almost like bird's eye view. It's like it's not wanting this, and you don't invest yourself in the destroying of your old house, right? It's not like that's you're putting all your passion.
The means to an end.
But I'm saying, but so it's not just about means; it's also about investment of self in let's say the destruction of the old house. You do it, but it's not investing yourself. You're doing it kind of like, I don't know, just like just, you're going through the motions of it because, yes, it is a means to an end. But the way you're relating to that act is not investment of self. It's like going through the motions or allowing it, but not passionately investing. And therefore, so in other words, klipa, which is like the destruction of the old house, that's as an example, Hashem is giving it life, but not inner desire in there, but like peripherally. And therefore, we say klipa is the abode of death and impurity. May God preserve us from them. For the minute measure of light and life that it derives, that it absorbs internally from the external aspect of divine holiness, is in a state of actual exile within it, as in the concept of the exile of the Shekhinah within the Klipa we described earlier. In other words, in of itself, the destruction, right, in the story of the destruction of the house, or in the cosmic arena, the allowance of Klipa, of concealment, of evil, God is allowing it to exist. However, it is begrudgingly, non-passionately, means to an end, all these things. It's allowing it, but not God is not found in the outer trappings of the means, of the outer trappings of the klipa. On the contrary, that is the denial, that is the concealment on God. So it can't be God is found there. It's actually it's pushing away God by its very design. At the same time, even something that looks like it's pushing away has to come from God. So that's what we say, that it's the mystical concept of the Shechina is in Gullus. The Shechina is in exile, that in everything, even in the destruction of exile and all the bad, there's a divine spark there. It is for this reason, too, the Klipa is termed other gods. Apart from the reason given above. The Klipa is termed other gods. Why? That's why Acherim sounds like our mystical word of Acherayim. Then the other gods, the backside gods, the backside forces that God is investing in a very backhanded way.
But there is no other gods.
100%. We're saying the forces,
I understand.
not the
I just have
God.
to say
Let's
that
say
when I
forces.
hear- Okay.
The other forces that people
God.
deem as gods can be retranslated based on what we said as the other forces that God relates to in a way of achirayim, in a way of backsidedness, of undesiring it directly. And that's why you see in a simple biblical word is really so much meaning is laden in there. You found a whole new Alan, a whole new translation of Elikim Achedim, other gods, other forces. Now it's even deeper. It means that, but it also explains to you how do they relate to the real God in a way of otherness. God looks at them as other, as peripheral, as undesirable.
You said ladenness? What's that?
Like I don't know.
You know ladenness?
Laden, like it's
Full of,
yeah.
Okay.
4, it constitutes actual idolatry and a denial of the unity of God, the Supreme King of Kings, the Holy and Blessed Be. That's why Klipa is called other gods, that God treats us other. It's not invested in. For inasmuch as the light and life of holiness, we said the internalized life force in even the Klipa is in a state of exile within the whole Klipa. Here's the deal. So if the Klipa was honest with itself, it would say, wait, how do I exist? Oh, wait, I have a spark. Okay, I like God. But it does not surrender itself to the holiness of God. On the contrary, it soars aloft like an eagle, saying, Ani v'afsi oid, a quote from Isaiah, that I am and there's nothing beside me. All arrogant rulers or Klipa people say, I am, or the Klipa that they come from say, there's nothing besides me. Or as in the statement of Pharaoh, as the prophet Yecheskel says, he paraphrases, the river is mine and I've made myself. I am the Nile, I made the Nile, I am the Nile. This is why the sage of blessed memory said that arrogance is truly tantamount to idolatry. Why? Why is an arrogant person like an idol worshiper?
It says anger too. Right?
But we'll get there soon. Or we won't get there, but it's a separate
both
thing.
of them
Because it's a form of self-worship.
Exactly. So self-worship, and the essence and root of idolatry is that it is regarded as an independent entity, separate. It feels like it makes itself independent, separate from the holiness of God. It doesn't have to be an outright denial of God. Interesting. As it's said in the Gemara that they have the realm of Klipa, call him the God of gods. Meaning that the idol worshippers will call God, or there's something beyond the pantheon of the God, nature gods. There's a God of all that. So they can acknowledge. The original idol worshippers would acknowledge that the way how idol worship start. Rambam has a whole.
Rambam.
How did he say it starts? Is that?
Isn't the sun?
they said, look, there's God, but God made his ministers, the sun and the moon. We gotta pay respect to his ministers, right? And then they eventually forgot about God. But originally,
God forbid.
what happened is that they're like, there's a God, but he's like far away. He works through his ministers, his governors, the governor of the sun, the governor of the moon. So I think his point here is that the characteristic of klipa / idol worship / arrogance is all the same, that it can acknowledge that there is somewhere high, but irrelevantly, there's some higher God. But in the relevance that I am all that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, because they consider themselves to be separate entities and independent beings, and thereby they separate themselves from the holiness of God, since they do not face themselves before him. They separate themselves from the holiness of God because they don't want to surrender. For the supernal holiness rests only in that which is surrendered to him, as explained above. We mentioned a few times, right? In chapter 6, you can only have holiness. Seemingly, every creation is a cover-up on God. But because a creation could choose to have bittul, surrender, so even its initial independence as a created thing, when it chooses to surrender, then it's not a cover-up.
That's high. I'm good.
It could be a cover-up, but then it surrenders, so it's not a cover-up. For this reason, the Zohar calls the klipot in the term of peaks of separation. They're as haughty as mountain peaks. But this does constitute denial of God's true unity. Even though you're acknowledging, yeah, God's somewhere, but I'm a self-made man. Yeah, God somewhere gave me life. But this is a denial of God's true unity, since his unity implies that all is esteemed as nothing before him, and that all is utterly nullified before him and before his will, which animates them all, which constantly brings them into being out of nothingness. So I think the important takeaway, and I didn't read the Steinsaltz, I don't know if there's anything interesting to add, Mike, but
Reading it now as you
look at the sidebars.
Careful. Careful. It's right there.
To see if there's a way to leave off. Okay. The main, I think, point, my own summary would be, we have an agenda here in these chapters. The agenda is, starting in chapter 18, that even when you don't have meditation about God, you don't have a expanded consciousness, which we said is the greatest way for the Bainani to overcome the temptations of the animal soul, to always win. Because if you have expanded consciousness, you don't you're not like, oh, I want to go have cotton candy. Like, you're like, give me a break. You don't want to do petty things when you have expanded consciousness as much, right? But chapter 18 said, it says in the verse that the whole Tanya is based on, Ki korav elecha davar ma'od, this matter is very near to you, It's very near, meaning it's not like if you become a good meditator, then it's near. No, it's near as is, meaning it's built into the human, the Jew's capacity. It's a built-in feature. It's very near, implying it's not only you have to go, it's reachable, it's at hand. It's at hand now. Reachable means you have to do something, and it's reachable. At hand, karov ma'od, the perfect service of God in thought, speech, and action is at hand. But wait a second. That means I can always access to do the right thing, even when I don't feel like it, even when I don't have a expanded consciousness.
Yeah.
So he says, yeah. So that takes him a bunch of chapters to say that bold statement. So he starts with chapter 18 and 19 saying, because we see every Jew has a avim soteris, a hidden love, meaning a super rational love that if it came down to do or die, to martyrdom, they'd give their life. Every Jew has a red line where they're going to give their life, like they can't deny God at a certain point, or they can't deny their Jewishness.
So, Rabbi, I know we don't care
Wait,
about.
let me train of thought.
Oh, okay.
Then,
Sorry.
But okay, so that's very nice. So we now know, if you finished 1819, that okay, if it came down to a horrible situation of a do or die, you're telling me that without any meditation, without any expanded consciousness, you would give your life and do the greatest act of martyrdom for God. Okay, but life is not martyrdom. Life is a bunch of small choices. So how does that help me that in the theoretical extreme adrenaline situation, a person would give their life for God, even if it's not their nature. It's against the way they live their lifestyle. But we're talking about regular life. Regular life is a bunch of small choices. And if you don't have that adrenaline situation, then what happens? You could fail, right? You could, as we said, with people who they were big, they sold themselves out, but it came to the big martyrdom, they gave their life. We're not talking, but life's not martyrdom. Life is small, what was that poet said, quiet lives of quiet desperation. Life could be quiet desperation, choices. Anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think
yeah. So to show the huge leap that you would give your life for martyrdom, and that, because it comes from the hidden love, that could be the at-hand trait of your soul to make you choose to not eat, something that's questionably kosher, a more pedestrian, choice of good and bad. So to do that, he has to go in chapter 20, 21, 22, building about what's God's unity. God's unity is everywhere, right? We explained how.
Right.
And so why do we feel separate? Because klipa. Everything in the world goes through klipa. It's different levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
No,
So
I don't understand.
everything, if ein od milvado, if God is everywhere and there's nothing else besides God,
Mm-hmm.
then how come you and me feel our independence?
Sometimes.
Why do we feel like we exist independently? Even if we know it ultimately comes because God gives us
Because
oxygen.
God is aware of us. That's our awareness.
Right. That's what we
God
feel.
aware. Individually, each of us is aware. God is
Exactly.
aware.
We're within God's mind, so to speak, right?
That's
But the fact is, we don't feel. We're not like a drop in the ocean that feels totally merged to the ocean. We feel like a drop outside the ocean. That's what we feel.
Mm-hmm.
No, I feel like God is aware of me most of the time.
Okay. Some of us are on
That's
lower levels than you.
my conscience.
So
That's
my point, I'm saying, I believe you. I'm saying the fact that we feel I deserve this or I want this, that's a feeling of self.
Sure.
At any level. The point is, you feel self but you're merged in the God's oneness. The answer is because everything comes through klipa. Everything comes in this world. God creates this kind of concealment that we feel this untruth, that we feel separate.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how much do people dig into the klipa? How much they dig into that untruth of concealment? And we're going to build up to show in the next chapter. We didn't get to how this plays out in the mitzvahs and whatnot, But the idea of selfness, independence, autonomy from God comes from klipa, and that is a low-key expression of, not the same thing, but it's a low-key expression of idolatry.
Right.
As we said, arrogance, which is a little more extreme, is a tantamount to idolatry, because selfness, separation, in the extreme, arrogance is the same concept of, despite that I know that I have a godly soul, or God, but I'm still going to go be a thief. But as an example, I'm still going to pick the selfish choice. Right? It says the example, the thief who's about to break in the Gemara, and he prays to God he should be successful. As he's about to tunnel in to make the heist, he prays to God for success. What's going on here? God doesn't want you to steal. That's why he's praying to God for this. Because even he acknowledges the God, but his circumstances and self have overtaken his lapse of that awareness. So he feels, I got to survive, I got to steal, whatever. And this is going to build up to tomorrow about how every mitzvah, therefore, or every sin is essentially a do or die. Is it either going to be a unity, a surrender to God's unity by doing the mitzvah, or is it going to be a